What is going on, everybody? A wild week one of the NFL is in the books, and we are back with the Power Rankings, our regularly scheduled content here at 9 a.m. Eastern Time every Tuesday following a great weekend of football. So we had some surprises, some big movers this week. We also had some good calls as well, some teams that are going to be kind of staying put. So without further ado, let's get into it. Quick reminder, do hit that like button. My goal here is to get 1,000 likes on this video, so do take a quick second to smash that like button, as they like to say. So starting here at number 32, rising a spot here, the Clemson Tigers. They're going to come in a tough game against Texas A&M this week, but Trevor Lawrence pulls through, and the Tigers are going to climb up to 32 here. And then at 31, we do have a tier gap here between the Clemson Tigers and the New York Giants. But they are going to fall down 2 spots here. And we really railed on the Giants all summer because they built their team all summer as if it was the 1980s as opposed to the modern passing offenses of today's game. And the Cowboys this week, despite giving Zeke the big extension at running back, they basically said, you know what, this Giants team, they want us to run the ball, so we're just going to throw the ball on this team that has no pass rush and a bunch of young corners, and it worked all day. So the Giants are in for a long season. I don't think it's going to be too many weeks here before we see Daniel Jones. Number 30 here, the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, I talked about this on the podcast. Quick plug, do go check out the Fully Inflated Football podcast on your podcast services. But the Bengals did actually impress this week. I thought Dalton actually looked pretty good as well. Just the movement in the power rankings wasn't in the works for the day. But I am excited to see kind of another couple weeks here with Zach Taylor, Andy Dalton, and this offense. That defensive line for the Bengals is really good. So I do think that they had a good week despite the loss there in Seattle. Moving up a couple spots here, we do have the Oakland Raiders, who kind of proved me wrong a little bit this week. Part of it was just Denver looked really bad. But in the home opener there in Oakland, they did get the job done. The defense played better than I had expected, and they did some nice things on offense. Tyrell Williams really is kind of proving me wrong in sorts. He has looked good throughout the preseason and now here in week one. Do keep in mind, though, that they're not going to move up crazy because they were already at 31 and they just lost their best player, Antonio Brown, since last week's power rankings. Then number 28, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to stay in this tier here. These teams just kind of have major question marks, whether it's dysfunction or just injuries, whatever it may be. Tampa Bay just kind of can't get it all put together. They got a really young defense, a really young secondary. Jameis just throwing games away still, even though he's got Bruce Arians down there, and that offensive line is just kind of a mess right now. So I will say that the secondary played well here for Tampa Bay, but certainly not the start to their season that they had hoped for. Number 27, the Washington Redskins. Got off to a good start, made some nice plays early against Philadelphia, but they're going to lose their D tackle, Jonathan Allen. This Redskins team just can't really avoid injuries. Case Keenum actually didn't look terrible, but I do think we'll see Dwayne Haskins here in a few weeks. I talked about this before the season started. I think that Week 4 matchup between the Redskins and the Giants would be a very entertaining debut of both of those rookies, especially if both of these teams are 0-3 at the time. Number 26, the Arizona Cardinals. They're going to move back up a couple spots. Kyler, that dude is going to be a problem in the NFL, and as we said before the season started, that this team is going to be in games and win some games simply because they have the better quarterback. And I really do think that highly of Kyler Murray. Now, they've got issues around being a young team, and they got their best player, Patrick Peterson, suspended for the first half of the year, so they're going to have their growing pains. But you really saw what the future could look like here in Arizona as Kyler did start slow, but really turned it on down the stretch and led a pretty epic comeback that did result in a tie here in the home opener here for the Arizona Cardinals. Number 25, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another thing I kind of joked about on the podcast, I joked about it on Twitter about how, the beauty of having Nick Foles as your starting quarterback is that when he gets injured, you're just going from one backup quarterback to the next. So despite losing their quarterback here till at best week 11, they just placed him on IR. They're not going to move a ton. They dropped this week to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, obviously, they would be better off with Nick Foles than Gardner Minshew, who's a rookie quarterback, but just by the eye test, you couldn't really see that big of a difference. So they're still going to be competitive with a really good defense, but probably going nowhere fast there with Gardner Minshew. Big faller here, one of the biggest fallers, actually the biggest faller on the week here is the Denver Broncos at 24. A pretty miserable showing on Monday Night Football. Flacco, there was some energy coming out of the preseason, just didn't have anything going. The offense looked really bad, and Vic Fangio's defense kind of paid the price for it as they had to kind of be on the field a little too much and just couldn't get the pressure that they wanted on Derek Carr. And maybe that secondary there for Denver not looking quite as improved as we had maybe hoped. So losing a lot of track there for the Denver Broncos. Then the Indianapolis Colts at 23. They're moving up a spot here. Jacoby Brissett definitely looked serviceable. Really excited to watch him continue to play because to me he kind of sits somewhere in the Dak Prescott, Andy Dalton category of guys that with the right situation around him can kind of come in as mid-round picks. Obviously, Brissett's been in the league for a while, but he has a lot of help here in Indianapolis, and this is going to be the story of the first probably 2 or 3 months of the year, is trying to figure out if Jacoby Brissett is that kind of starting caliber player. So excited to watch them. That defense, Malik Hooker had a sick interception. He was one of my breakout players this year. So the Colts are going to hang around here, and they're probably pretty happy that Nick Foles is gone. The Titans looked good this week, as did the Texans, but they're very much in that AFC South right now, despite a loss in overtime, which, by the way, changed these freaking overtime rules, NFL. The fact that both teams don't get a chance on offense is an utter joke here in 2019. Number 22 in the power rankings, the New York Jets are going to stay put. They could not finish that game against the Bills. They were really in the lead for the majority of the game, and then Darnold couldn't put together the fourth quarter drive. This is just a team to me that the narrative is going to continue for the rest of the year, that talented team, they can hang in a lot of games, but probably a year away. 21, the Baltimore Ravens. We talked in depth about Lamar Jackson's kind of breakout or big game that Twitter was just on fire about. You know, the number one point I'm going to have here, because I have caught a lot of flack for saying that Lamar Jackson is an inaccurate quarterback, and I'm not changing my stance on that against one team that didn't even make the power rankings here. Like, all jokes aside, the Miami Dolphins are just miserable. But my biggest point that I can say here is that being an inaccurate quarterback does not mean that you can't make accurate throws. It simply means that you don't make accurate throws at the rate that you desire. So yes, Lamar Jackson had the time to sit in there and eat a sandwich before throwing the football to wide open wide receivers, and he made all the throws that he had to, and you'll give him credit for that. He looked good, but I'm not going to all of a sudden jump on board with Lamar Jackson. Let's see him against a real defense in pressure moments hit a slant on 3rd and 7 and not throw it into the ground. Number 20, the Buffalo Bills. They're going to stay put here despite the win. It was a big win for that team, and the movement, again, kind of like we said at the Bengals, it just wasn't in the works. So they are going to hang around here at 20. Excited to see them follow up that big win next week. It was a pretty big comeback, and that defense coming home here soon is going to get a chance to really start lighting it up. It's a team that is going to be very thankful for any road wins they can get, and they kind of snuck out of MetLife Stadium with one last week. Number 19, the Carolina Panthers. They're dropping down here a few spots. I had injury concerns about Cam Newton, and it's not even necessarily the injury concerns here. It's just his throwing motion combined with his previous shoulder surgeries. Just Cam Newton, to me, does not have it in terms of throwing the ball around the field right now. He is throwing across his body from a clean pocket. I'm thinking about doing a video on it this week if I have time, breaking down how bad his throwing mechanics are right now and why it's really costing this Panthers team's future and games this year. The defense did look good, though, against the Rams, and they did come close to pulling off that upset that I did pick. Number 18, the Tennessee Titans. Kind of the storyline of Week 1 was the Browns, as 6-point home favorites, got slaughtered here. So the Tennessee, gonna give them the respect they do deserve off of that blowout in Cleveland. That was not an easy win, especially with Taylor Lewan out. Now, I will say, just like I said on the podcast yesterday, was that, Cleveland did have 16 penalties for like almost 200 yards, and they were able to win the turnover battle. But, a lot of that is credit to Tennessee just being a more stable culture and a smarter football team. So they are probably, right there with Houston in terms of who can win this division. Going to be excited to see that all play out. And then Detroit Lions actually going to move up a spot despite the tie. This is another team that's just kind of sound. I got a good laugh because I predicted the Lions to have a tie in my preseason predictions show. And here we go. Week 1, they get a tie. And I did that because I figured if any team is going to have a tie this year, and if I'm going to predict it, it's going to be the Detroit Lions. And I think that's going to be kind of indicative of their season here. I think they're going to hover around this 16 to 20 range all year, hover around 500 all year. Really wasn't surprised, honestly, to see them walk away with a tie as a slightly better team on the road. And then we got a tier jump here. This tier, we got 4 teams in this tier. These are talented teams that I think can be legitimate playoff contenders, but just have some pretty major question marks going on. So at the top of that tier here is 16, the Cleveland Browns. I'm not going to write them off. I was making fun of them on Twitter, and I have been kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out on the Browns, I think. On one hand, I did say this team could make the playoffs. I did pick them to win pretty big last week. But on the other hand, I thought it was preposterous to have them with like 14-1 Super Bowl odds and as the heavy favorite for this division. So they are going to have to figure out how to clean up their act a little bit. And that defense does really concern me. That defense looked incredibly slow and missing a lot of talent. This week against a pretty, marginal Titans offense. So the defense does concern me. I think they'll clean some things up. I also do think Baker is developing some trends in that he will attempt a lot of dangerous passes over the middle into contested areas. And it's just a trend. I'm not saying that he can't fix it or that it's any kind of knock on him becoming any sort of elite quarterback, but it's something I've talked about over the last couple weeks, and all of his picks in this game came on throwing those kind of slants or in routes towards the second level, trying to sneak it in between the 2 levels of the defense, I should say, and smart defenders are going to be able to read those and jump on them. And even if 5 out of 6 times he makes really amazing looking throws, those are dangerous attempts that are going to result in a lot of interceptions, and that's what we saw in this game against the Titans. A smart defense able to capitalize off of those tendencies. Number 15, the Atlanta Falcons. They just lack a lot of physicality right now. They lose Chris Lindstrom, their rookie right guard, for the first half of the year now with a broken foot. When Matt Ryan's your quarterback, you have got to buy him time to throw, especially if your defense is going to play as bad as it did in Minnesota. So stock down for the Falcons this week. They got to turn around and flip the Eagles this week, so it's not going to get much easier in terms of having to control the line of scrimmage. That's going to be a really interesting game to watch because I think the Eagles control the line of scrimmage better than any team in the league, and the Falcons might be the inverse of that. Number 14, the San Francisco 49ers. They went into Tampa Bay as underdogs and picked up the win, and they are going to move up in the power rankings here, but it's not, clear water right now for the 49ers. They're still recovering from some injuries. Also, Jimmy Garoppolo threw a pick 6 in this game. They had some big penalties. It's a team that kind of spent the preseason giving us some weird vibes in terms of, is this just a collection of talent? Or is this like a real playoff team that's going to be good around the margins? So they showed some good moments, but they also had a lot of moments that kind of left you scratching your head. So they got to clean some stuff up, but I still think the Niners have a lot of talent this year. 13, the Pittsburgh Steelers, big dropper this week. I mean, they just kind of threw up all over themselves in Foxborough. You really can't put it any other way. Their problems in the secondary have not been solved. That pass rush that was so good last year was non-existent. Big Ben couldn't hit a receiver. The receivers couldn't get open. Even the offensive line didn't look great. Like, they will be better, and I'm not going to drop them all the way down here and sell all my Steelers stock, but it was very concerning. Right now, I would say of my calls for the preseason, the Steelers are looking like being the best chance at being a bad call. And that AFC North is really opening up right now because Baltimore's rising here, Cleveland, Pittsburgh are falling, and Cincinnati, I think, is all the way down there at 30, but could actually kind of hang in there. And then we got a tier jump up here into the top 12. Now, these right now are the teams that I think are very legitimate playoff teams. So we got number 12, the Seattle Seahawks. They didn't look amazing against Cincinnati. I will say it's not the best matchup for them. The Bengals have a very good defensive line. That's the strength of that team, and the Seahawks traditionally struggle against teams with excellent pass rushes because their offensive line is just not very good. So they took care of business at home. It wasn't clean, but they kind of do this. This is kind of who the Seahawks are. They don't really slaughter a lot of teams. They keep things close, rely on Russell Wilson to make big plays, take care of the football, and play good defense. And it worked out again this week. Number 11, the Houston Texans. This is the biggest riser this week, and they lost. They were in New Orleans as, 6-point underdogs, and they were basically one play away from winning that game. Now, I will say, when there's 6 seconds left, and you basically know that the Saints either are going to get a 6-yard completion and kick the game-winning field goal, or chuck the Hail Mary, drop 11 guys into coverage. The clock will provide the pass rush for you. You can take away those hitches and the prevent defense. You run that, maybe the Texans win this game. And I don't even know if they would jump even further. But that is a good example of how wins and losses for me don't really matter. It's how did you look? What happened in the game? Did you get screwed? Were you close? That's, I think, the beauty of my power rankings versus some of those out there. The Minnesota Vikings, they're going to move up 3 spots. They looked excellent. Now, home field is big for this team. They are a much better team at home than they are on the road. So we're going to see how they look in Green Bay and how they can kind of control the line of scrimmage, where I think they will have disadvantages, honestly, on both sides of the ball. Whereas Atlanta, they were able to kind of bully them up front. Number 9, the Dallas Cowboys took care of business against the Giants. Dak looked good. Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, good to see them kind of passing the ball. There's going to be weeks where they rely on the run a little more too. Cowboys are just a very good football team this year, simply put. Chargers, they are going to move up a spot here. They did get lucky enough to win that coin toss in a game where the defenses were totally fatigued. And it was kind of funny because in my weekly picks video, I said that, the Chargers will probably find a way to win this game, but they'll also probably find a way to be the Chargers and let the Colts cover. Well, they fumble a punt and throw a pick in the red zone and let the Colts back into the game. And that's just kind of what the Chargers do. Number 7, the LA Rams. They took care of business in Carolina. Hats off to Vegas. They were 3-point favorites on the road. They won by 3. Jared Goff was still Jared Goff. A bunch of bad throws in this game. But a lot of times it's just not going to matter because this team has so much talent around them. That defense, you got Aaron Donald. So, number 6, the Chicago Bears. Yes, they lost, and yes, Trubisky looked like garbage. But when I ranked this team 6th in the power rankings last week, nothing's changed. I thought Trubisky was terrible last week, and that hasn't changed based on what we saw. If anything, it just confirmed it. But we also saw that defense come out and look possibly even better than last year. To me, best defense since that Broncos team back when they beat the Panthers in 14? So, this team at worst is going to be like an 8-8 team, but it's just hard to beat Chicago when it's hard to score. And I think Trubisky, while he did play bad, is going to look better in future games because he does make nice plays. He just happened to not make any against Green Bay, who is going to come in here at number 5. So no movement here, 5 through 7. really encouraging to see the additions that Green Bay made be the big reasons that this team won the game, because that's like what our narrative has been and why people have been saying we're too high on Green Bay, is that I think this defense is going to be legit. You get Aaron Rodgers back healthy, a new coach, and this is a new look football team, and it certainly was a new look football team. That was a huge win to go into Chicago and win the NFL opener. Then we have a tier gap, the same tier gap up to the top 4, the same 4 teams in the top 4. So the New Orleans Saints are going to come in at number 4. That game honestly kind of went as expected. I do have just some kind of weird feelings about the Saints. They have an incredible roster. There's not a ton of reasons to believe Drew Brees is going to have this big regression. To me, it's a little bit just gut feeling, but I got to, let my mind do most of the work here in these power rankings. So New Orleans is still going to come in here at number 4. Pretty epic finish to that game there on Monday night. Number 3, the Kansas City Chiefs. They're going to drop a spot here. Tyreek Hill's out for a few weeks. This is more about just the Patriots looking as good as they did. But the Chiefs, big win there in Jacksonville. Not a whole lot of surprises this week. The Philadelphia Eagles at number 2. They're going to drop a spot here again because of the Patriots. I did get a good laugh on Twitter. I'm sorry if you're watching this video, but someone asked me, Redskins are up 17-0. What do you think? And I'm like, a lot of football left. Like, the Redskins have had some big plays. Carson Wentz hasn't played in a long time. Give him a second to get booted up. Sure enough, hits Deshaun Jackson for like a 60-yard touchdown. The Eagles just soared. And if it wasn't for just an absolute garbage backdoor cover, the Eagles were going to actually cover this game despite being down 17-0 in the first quarter. So the Eagles are going to be fine. Carson Wentz looked like the MVP pick that I had. And then number 1, the New England Patriots. I mean, if you want a bunch of Patriots talk, go check out my podcast. They just were utterly insane. And they added Antonio Brown. One thing I did say on that podcast is that, yes, they added Antonio Brown, and doing so is going to help them look like they did on Sunday night with those receivers just wide open, constantly catching everything. Adding Antonio Brown is going to help that be the version of the Patriots that we see on a week-to-week basis. But for the people saying, wow, they look this good, they're going to be even better once they get Antonio Brown, that's not exactly how it works. Like, they already got perfect wide receiver play in that game against the Steelers. So, like, it's going to help them look like that more consistently. But I don't know if you have to be scared of them being even better than that, because, to be honest, it's not even all that possible to look better than that. They were pretty much perfect, and it's hard to see this team not winning 14-plus games and playing in the Super Bowl again. So those are the ranks this week. Again, guys, please hit that like button. We'll see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern for Studs and Duds, recapping the best performers and the worst performers from NFL Week 1. And then we'll have my picks video on Patreon this week. So again, if you want those picks, check out my Patreon link in the description. So cheers, guys. We'll see you for the next one.